Welcome to the Revival Method podcast, where we teach you actionable steps that you can take to start moving, thinking, and feeling better. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Revival Method podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Parker, and today we're going to be covering a super important topic that I feel like has been a deep-rooted myth in the health and wellness space. I mean, such a deep-rooted myth where people are stuck frustrated, scratching their head, and wondering what they are doing wrong. And in fact, they might not be doing anything wrong. They're just neglecting certain aspects of their lifestyle. So before we hop into this topic, I want to just announce a couple things because I have a butterfly brain and I'll probably forget. So let's get it out of the way. Okay. So first and foremost, if you have been getting any value from this podcast, please take the 5 seconds that it would take to hit the 5-star review and hit subscribe. Now, me being an avid podcast listener, I understand how you might think to yourself, like, yeah, I'll do it. And then you forget. So please just take the second that it would take to hit that 5-star review and hit subscribe. What this is going to do is it's going to tell the algorithm, hey, this show is worth listening to, which is going to boost the awareness of the show, which is going to help my meta impact. I want to help as many people as possible because having a bunch of followers really doesn't mean anything, but actually having an impact, changing somebody's life, that's what I'm all about. And you can help me do that by simply doing the things that I just asked. The other thing that I wanted to announce is I have something very special being announced to my newsletter and my community on Monday. If you're not a part of either of those things, what you can do is you can message me on Instagram or anywhere that you can find me to be asked to be put on it, and I will go ahead and add you to those things. Over time, once the community and newsletter participants get their first dibs, then I'll start to announce it to the podcast and more specifics, and also the Instagram as well. So without further ado, if you are ready, so am I. We're going to be talking about injury prevention. Okay. You see it across all social media. People are like, oh, if you want to prevent injury, you have to stretch. You have to do this special exercise. You have to warm up for 15 minutes. But that is nothing further from the truth. So let me paint a picture for you, give you the basics and principles around injury. So when you look at some of these things online, you have a BS meter where simply you're saying like, okay, I know this is just somebody looking for additional likes because it does well on the algorithm. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's a lot of parroting going on. They'll see somebody get 1 million views and they go, okay, I'm just going to do that. But there's really no rationale behind it. So I'm going to give you the context. So you are actually smarter than most of the people that are even posting some of the stuff that they think is going to go viral. Okay. So what is injury? How does it happen? Right? If you understand this, you'll actually start to calibrate your perspective and how you're going to approach this. So an injury happens when a stress is placed on the body and the stress is higher than our current level of strength or preparedness. So what do I mean by that? We're going to make a simple example here. And then, of course, we can apply it to all different aspects of life. One example of how we get injured is, let's say you can only push 100 pounds in front of you. That is your max strength on your best day. And then I decide to say, hey, here's a 200-pound weight. Go ahead and push it. Chances are you're going to be injured. That's just because the stress is higher than what our body can currently handle. Now, once again, I said chances are, right? Nothing is absolutes when it comes to a body. Nothing happens in a vacuum. The other example, because that one is pretty simple, everyone's like, duh. The other one most people forget is, let's say you have work deadlines. Your kids are sick and so are you. So you're waking up through all the night. Something else happens where your sleep is low, your stress is high, and you don't have enough time to even think about eating. So that means your recovery is in the toilet. Well, I think it's safe to say in this circumstance, you're not going to be at your best, meaning the chances of you lifting your best weight, that 100 pounds, is going to be non-existent. So let's say in the same example, now I'm asking you to lift that personal best of 100, and you just went through a week or a month of that poor recovery. You can also experience an injury because you are not even prepared for your best, right? And I feel like that's what truly happens with most people. For example, I have clients all the time come into me. I call it Disney World syndrome. They come back in with lower back issues, neck issues, and they're wondering what the heck happened. I ask them to pull out their phone. They check their step count. It's like in the 25,000s. Disney World is massive, and you have a workload that is much higher than what you're ever used to. Most of the people's averages, unfortunately, is around 4,000 steps. And then you go to Disney World and you go to 25,000 steps for multiple days in a row, your body is going to be upset. It's going to be hypersensitized. And that premise right there, where we're spiking in workload, is going to be prevalent in everything you do. Okay. So keep that in mind. So now that we understand how injury actually happens, let's talk about how we can prevent it, right? Like, what are the things that we can do to prevent injury? Well, the best that we can. Reduce the chances of injuries, a better way of phrasing it. Okay. So, first and foremost, you cannot go wrong with getting strong. The stronger that your muscles are, the more endurance that they have, the chances of you getting a weight that surpasses your preparedness is going to be much lower, right? If you can, let's say you can push, or you can pick a 200-pound weight off the ground, right? Well, anything below that point of 200 pounds isn't going to give you any type of issue, just because you are stronger than that. And because you have a higher threshold of strength, even though your recovery is low in this time frame, it's going to dwindle down. You can still manage to lift much more weight than if your maximal strength was only 100 pounds. So you cannot go wrong with getting strong. And the only way that you're going to be able to do this is progressive overload. Fancy way of saying that you're going to make sure that when you're lifting weights, when you're working against resistance, you're constantly challenging yourself in a safe manner, which we're going to address later. I'm going to give you some frameworks that are going to be perfect for you to make sure that you're optimally training yourself, but you're not doing too much to run the risk of injury. Okay. So, can't go wrong getting strong. That is one side of the equation, right? So the stronger you are, the less likely you're going to encounter a force that's going to be too much for you. Okay. But we also talked about the preparedness side, right? How do we boost, or how do we fill our gas tank to the point that we're always feeling fresh? Let's start with sleep. Well, if you're not getting enough sleep, research is very clear on this. The chances of you experiencing injury skyrockets. And if you're currently experiencing, like if you already have an injury and your sleep is compromised, you're actually going to feel much more pain as well. So, just to be clear here, let's say two people with the same injury with the same pain tolerance, somebody that's not getting their, let's say, 6 to 9 hours, depending on how they optimally sleep, somebody that is getting that type of sleep and somebody that's not, somebody that's not getting that sleep is more likely to experience higher levels of pain. So by simply making sure your sleep is a priority, your pain experience can improve dramatically. So boom, one, sleep enough. You're going to be decreasing your chances of injury and also making your pain experience much better. Then you got two, stress. Stress is linked to so many pain syndromes, right? And it's no secret that, like, when you look at observational studies, they'll show that, like, oh, neck pain and job dissatisfaction go hand in hand. If you don't like where you're at, you're going to be hyper focused on the pain that you're feeling. And not to mention, most of our jobs are just like really hard on our bodies, needless to say. But that being said, if we can get our stress levels to a manageable level, our body's not going to be in that flight or fight stage where we're going to be on high alert. We can actually relax and no longer make pain the forefront of our thought process, right? How do we do that? Well, there's plenty of ways, and you're going to need a personalized approach for you. But a simple approach that you can use is, if you are at work and you feel stressed, check your heart rate by simply putting your fingers right underneath your thumb until you feel a pulse. Don't use your thumb though, okay? By doing that, I want you to count how many beats that you count in 30 seconds. Times that by 2 and write down that number. That is where your current heart rate is at. If it's like in the hundreds and you are just at your desk, Let's try to bring that down. And you can simply do that by controlling your breath. Deep breath in, hold for a couple seconds, deep breath out, hold for a couple seconds. And you'll start to see your heart rate come down. That would take you out of that super high strung, the high strung feeling and make you a little bit more relaxed, which will actually feed into other things quite nicely because when we're highly stressed, our sleep is going to be compromised, and so is our nutrition, which is a perfect segue. Nutrition, right? How do we make sure we are eating the proper foods to make sure that we're not going to be injured in the future? No, there's no magical food like, hey, make sure you're eating raspberries because that's going to prevent knee pain. That doesn't exist. No. But we know that if we're eating enough protein, we're going to be supporting a healthy amount of muscle mass, which is going to feed into the strength equation that I talked about earlier. The stronger you are, the less likely you're going to be injured, right? So I guess this is a perfect moment to put a pin in this as well. Strength is one thing. Strength through a full range of motion is another thing. So when I'm talking about strength, I want you to understand that I'm talking about training your exercises through a full range of motion so it transfers well into your day-to-day life. Okay, it's one thing to be super strong in the top half of the squat and or being super strong at the bottom half of the squat. So just make sure that you are exposing your body to these ranges of motion because you don't want to be super weak in the bottom of a squat, which is highly transferable to picking anything off the ground in day-to-day life, right? So yeah, small segue there. But back to the nutrition. We want to make sure that we're eating enough protein to support muscle mass, which then helps us with the strength side of things. You also want to make sure you're eating enough calories. If you are in a caloric deficit, right, unless your goal is fat loss, of course, your body is going to be operating off of less calories to heal and repair. And it's clear, like when you are not eating enough calories, you are at a higher risk of injury. So for example, if your body has to repair on a daily basis and you keep on just sitting in this caloric deficit, not eating enough, and your body has to pull from your body fat, there's going to come a point in time where there's not going to be enough body fat for it to pull from. Therefore, there's not enough calories to go around, right? And that's going to create a what we call a catabolic state where we're losing muscle mass. And then also, I guess, not having enough calories to repair the body to begin with, right? So making sure that we have enough calories, we are either maintaining our weight or losing our body weight, if that's our goal, at a slow rate. Because if you're doing it fast, those large swings can create havoc and increase our chances of getting injured. Without getting too much into it, if we have a dramatic weight loss due to cutting our calories like crazy, you run into sleep issues and also GI issues as well. So that all plays a role. Now, that's kind of like, so let me just recap because I know I'm throwing a lot in a small amount of time here. So you can't go wrong with getting strong. We got to make sure we're getting enough quality and quantity sleep. We need to make sure that we're controlling our stress levels. And then we also need to make sure that we are eating enough protein and calories to fuel our body, right? All this might be duh at the surface, but we tend to forget that. And we don't realize that it is feeding into these injury prevention situation, right? So when somebody online saying, "Oh, do you want to prevent injury?" or the reason why you're injured is because you didn't stretch, that's very reductionist, and they're not they're not considering the whole equation, right? So I guess we can talk about preparedness, right? Because everything comes down to, is your body prepared for the stress? It is important for you to warm up. Warming up does reduce your chances of injury. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to do these circus tricks that so many people are posting online because it gets you to stop scrolling and it stops you and you might interact with it, right? Warming up is important, but it's only important when you are preparing your body for the biggest load that it's going to experience, right? So how do you prepare for, let's say, a squat? Well, you're going to have to make sure that your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings are all prepared to go into that deep range of motion. Maybe you do some exercises that make the area feel warm, but it's not prepared for a squat until you start squatting. That's why you start with lighter weight and you build your way back up. Let's talk about running. There's a reason why you do running specific active drills to prepare the body for that type of stress. Sitting there, stretching your hamstrings, stretching your quads, doing some leg swings that might feel good, but it's not preparing the body. Therefore, if you get injured, it's not because you didn't stretch enough, right? It's just because your body wasn't prepared for the stress, whether it be not strong enough, not having enough endurance, or you just didn't sleep or didn't have enough nutrients in your body, or your stress is through the roof, right? Remember that stress is pretty unique in the way that like mental stress can wear you down just as much as physical stress. So think of that all in a bucket. Plenty of people feel exhausted, but they haven't done anything physical in a while, but they're doing heavy intellectual work in front of the computer 8 hours a day. That wears you down because your brain uses glucose, right? Still can wear you down, still makes your central nervous system feel tired. Okay. So there's that, but I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here. Let's give you some tangible frameworks here, and I can always revisit this topic if someone's like, tell me more. So how do we know we are training hard enough to be optimal, but not so much so that we actually run the risk of injury? There is a beautiful framework that you can learn that's going to be what I call dynamic. It's going to change according to how you feel because we're not robots. There's going to be weeks that we feel like garbage, but that doesn't mean we have to completely avoid exercise altogether. So, what is this framework? It's called reps in reserve. Reps in reserve is simply a question that you ask yourself every time you finish exercising or every time you finish a certain set. Let's say you're doing 10 reps of a bodyweight squat. You finish the 10 reps, you ask yourself this question: if I were to go to failure, how many more could I have done? And you got to be honest with yourself. And at first, you might not be accurate with your number, but as you keep asking yourself, it gets better and better. So you ask yourself, okay, yeah, I probably could have done maybe 10 more. If that number that you say is not like four, if it's not four or under, like if it's not one, two, three, or four, you're not training hard enough, right? When you're not training hard enough, you're leaving progress on the table. And that's fine if that's okay with you, but you could be more optimal with your approach. But also on the other side of things, if you're saying zero every time you are exercising and you're just like depleting that gas tank, you are going to be more likely to be injured. And the research shows that you don't necessarily need to go to failure to get the same amount of muscle gain as if you were, let's say, 1 to 2 reps shy of failure. So, me personally, I want the biggest bang for my buck and not risk injury. So that's where you'll find me hang around the 1 to 2 reps in reserve range. So once again, ask yourself the question of how many more could I have done? If you're being honest and the answer is higher than 4 or lower than 1, we need to adjust the weight or the sets accordingly. If it's too easy, you're saying I could have done 10 more, add more reps, add more weight. If it's too hard, do the opposite, okay? Another framework that I want to talk about is called the stoplight method. The stoplight method is a very powerful framework for somebody that is dealing with some discomfort. It's something that I use with my one-on-one clients, and it gives them the freedom that they're looking to have. Okay. So think of a stoplight. You have a yellow, green, and red light. Okay. Red means stop, green means go, yellow means cautious, right? If you are feeling a discomfort somewhere between 1 to 3 out of 10 when it comes to the pain scale, you're fine. You're okay as long as the pain is not creeping up or intensifying as you exercise. If you're experiencing a discomfort level of a 4 through 6, that's yellow. Let's see if we can modify, see if we can get it back into that green zone. Okay. And then lastly, if it's a 7 or above, stop what you're doing, go ahead and modify and change the exercise out because there's no real reason why you have to do a specific exercise. So Do you need exercise with pain? No, you do not. There is some research that suggests having a small amount of discomfort is beneficial, but it's not a necessity. I'm giving you this framework so you don't feel fearful of moving with the discomfort, because I know some clients of mine, they sat in years worth of pain because they felt like discomfort means do not move. But sometimes it's just your body being hypersensitive to begin with, and you have to desensitize it to actually get forward with the progress that you're looking to make. So those are the two frameworks that I want you to play around with. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover today. I might have to revisit this topic a little bit later in the time frame. If you have any questions, if you just want to reach out and say that this episode was beneficial to you, if you have any ideas of what you want me to cover in the future, I would love to hear your feedback, because once again, this is my tool to help you. So why not make these podcasts tailor to what you actually need to get you across the finish line? All right. Peace.